I was asked to be the keynote speaker, and I undertook the task, and I got to tell you how much fun it was looking back into our history and discovering the heritage that was way before 1984. And John is right. In 1984, I made that leap of faith in the Midtown Manhattan at Citicorp when I decided to go into business for myself. It was a scary time indeed, but timing was essential, and I didn't realize the good timing that I had. So as we look back into time, I want to start actually back in 1980. It was a recession. I couldn't find a job as an electrician. I had just come from California to New York. I took a job at an American can company, working graveyard shift. And I remember working in the print shop. All this paper would come out. This was the job control language at the time for the programmers. And I graduated to the tape library, the computer floor, and I developed schematics of how the tape drives were wired to Bedazzi and all these things. And I remember being introduced to this little device you see on the screen with the red phone in it. It's called the acoustic coupler. Many of you may recall the acoustic coupler. This was the first telecommuting device that allowed programmers to work from home. It worked at 300 baud. Fantastic. We had a sophisticated network at American Can Company, multi-drop lines running at 2.4, 4.8, and 9,600 bits per second. Our testing tools were very, very primitive. We had essentially speakers that we listened to the polling going on at that time. And as we progressed, we came into an era of the 80s and 90s that had witnessed many, many changes. The first change is with regard to the famous 1980 consent decree from Judge Green. Broke up AT&T, the world's largest company, 1 million employees. This took a period of 10 years to take place, but certainly it was a monumental decision that affected our industry. Those decisions are being made today in Congress. In '84, when the RCDD program started, it wasn't that easy. It wasn't without debate. As a matter of fact, the debate had it that there was to be 2 credentials. According to Vic Phillips, who championed the effort, and Harry Pfister, it was the RCDC, which was going to be the superior credential. They decided to focus on 1 credential, steer the ship in a straight direction. And we're glad they did, because at the same time, inside wire was being deregulated in '87. Simplex, complex, and then embedded wiring started to be deregulated. This started to shape the future for BICSI as UTP was being accepted for data. Of course, UTP was accepted for voice for some time. So in the MIS and in the hierarchy of the data center, as the signals were home run, UTP started to be accepted, but it was very much distrusted. I remember back in '83 and '84 testing IBM 3270 signals with a Balun that really started to shake things up. Our land specialists started in '94, as well as some of the other events that are unfolding to help shape our future, like Division 17. There was a big debate in the late '80s and early '90s. It was the Ethernet versus token ring, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Actually, the World Wide Web was getting underway as well in the early '80s. We're going to take a look at some of the future, but as I recall in my business, it was difficult during those days because I was an electrician who learned communications and computers and formed my company back in the day and went out there and I started a family, and I've been in business with my wife now for 23 years. And I got to tell you, there were some pretty scary times. I recall going door to door in Connecticut looking for corporate accounts. We did network cutovers and wiring, and I was constantly getting rejected. no, we have someone who does that for us, or no, we do that internally. And I'll never forget the day I had an account on one floor. I went down to the floor below, and I introduced myself. I was in a pinstripe suit, looking good, feeling good. And I was promptly rejected. Addie Toms, the office manager, said, no, we have people to do that for us in-house. 2 weeks later, she called me. She said, you know what? I thought we did, but we don't. Could you come in and talk to us about doing some wiring? At the time, it was Apple Talk and 3270. That account grew, and they grew to multiple buildings throughout the campus, and I was able to grow my company. So for you entrepreneurs out there, or for you people that are thinking about going in business, this is a good time to start to plant the seed. It's a little scary, but as they say, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. And I've been very fortunate to have been in business now for 23 years. The ISPs were being developed in the 80s as well. This was dial-up services. Our BICSI RCDD credential was starting to take off, and in '84, we had, actually in '88, we had a few members that were growing, and the RCDD program was growing, but I distinctly recall in '86, I needed to bring a level of competence to my customers, and I found the RCDD credential. But before we go forward, I want to take a step back even to the '60s, where the architects and builders, you'll see in the upper left, the death of the architects and builders and the birth of the building industry consultant. This was the origin of our past. And in the '60s, it was handed off in the '70s. And in the '70s, Harry Pfister was working with GTE at the time. And this also is another picture of the famous tobacco warehouse in Lexington, Kentucky in the '70s, where engineers would get together to figure out, in this case, you can see it's a closed header trench duct cellular floor that they're working with the cubic inch capacity, and they're trying to figure out the methods of cable distribution here. This was the heritage of our organization. Here's a shot of time gone past in the Tampa office when we actually moved from Kentucky to Tampa in 1980. However, this is a shot in '87 of Jay Warmke, previous executive director, Larry Romig, and Jeannie Hand, who's here with us, and Joan Hirsch, who's still with us at BICSI, serving BICSI for many, many years. This was the first telecommunications distribution methods manual that Harry absconded with at GTE. Is that right, Harry? This was something, from what I understand from Vic Phillips, AT&T was not so kind to give us the industry Bible, a Bible that I was searching for. But we managed to get a very much similar, if not duplicate, from GTE, and that started the Telecommunications Distribution Methods Manual. But the RCD, the first RCDDs that we're going to announce a little later, did not have this manual. They weren't tested on the manual. They were tested on a kind of a very subjective test that had application-based questions, which is actually what we're going to, according to Bob Erickson, from knowledge-based to application-based. In any case, they were the origin, the first RCDDs who we celebrate today took the exam based upon application-based questions. Eventually, we would go to the TDMM and take the questions out that we have today in the exam, which are based upon knowledge-based questions. Here you'll see a shot. We have our banquet tomorrow night, and I really looked at the shot and I said, wow, look at this. All the guys are looking good. They got ties on, jackets on. You can see the room is kind of filled with smoke, so you know it's certainly days gone by. And now you see one of BICSI's first displays, the first booth at the first conference. Notice the publications, how big they are, you know. The drafting table, it was a classic booth. We're really active out there now, taking our BICSI message to so many different events. I'll talk to you about some late-breaking news a little later in my presentation.